why can't we do music more like this? Why can't it be how do you get this indie sound? I remember him saying, "Oh, you just don't play very well." And it always struck me.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for asking. Touring Canada in the winter is a bold thing to do.
I like being bold. Yeah, I mean, first time I played in Toronto, actually, it was like -17 or some shit.
Talk to me a little bit about those early days of No Plan. I think what I'm curious about is what scene did you come out of in London? What was the scene that you were a part of or not a part of?
Well, I lived in a place called near Camden, so we played a lot of those North London venues, clubs, pubs, um, Mean Fiddler and all the Dublin Arms and all these things. So, I mean, I was just part of a gang of people making music that I knew. The scene was much more connected to Britpop, probably. We're a bit more outliers on our own, just trying to make rock music. So we just kind of existed in Camden and played around there, and we were good for Friday nights, Saturday nights at clubs. It's funny, that concept of scenes, they're sort of, they're often taken as quite, retrospectively, or at the time, it's hard to feel like you're in it. I mean, you're kind of just doing it. I suppose you're traveling with similar bands, playing shows in similar places, festivals, but I don't know. Just try and do the best you can and sort of make great music and do great shows. And of course, it's nice when you start to buddy up with people and you have friends in the scene. But yeah, that's about it. I mean, we definitely weren't part of the Britpop scene.
I guess that's what I'm curious about, is that when I say scene, it's usually people making similar-ish music at the same time. And what I find really interesting about Bush, and I don't know the answer, is how you were sort of separate musically from the Britpop thing that was happening at the same time. So I guess my question was like, was there an alternate scene that I just didn't know about? Were there other bands that I didn't know about making different music than what was happening to Britpop at the time? Or did you really just feel like an outlier?
There's plenty of rock bands in England. It just was very hard. It didn't have the same in the way that possibly like maybe in Canada we have with much music, with the radio, in America with the radio. There still wasn't the same level of support for any rock bands in England. So it'd be kind of hard for you to know about them. There are a lot of really cool English rock bands, Idols, Bring Me the Horizon, right? They're English. So people have made great rock music. It just was that scene, as you say, at that time was definitely Britpop heavy.
You were really influenced by this band. Just take a listen to this.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
That's Debaser from the Pixies. So Gavin, talk to me about Pixies and what they meant to you and how they influenced you on your journey.
I loved punk music when I was a kid. Then I moved on to post-punk. I really liked the kind of Public Image, Gang of Four. I liked those bands. Then I was in one band my first band where I didn't play any music. So I was trying to influence it as I wanted it to be, but didn't quite come around there enough. Then I was in a second band where I didn't play the music either. And it was rock, but it was more traditional rock, traditional blues-based rock. Really great guitar player. And we couldn't get it going in England. And then he left me and whatever, the band broke up. And then when I was looking to band myself, I knew that I didn't really like the kind of Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, that sort of English rock, and then you had the American kind of Guns N' Roses, which were incredible record, that Appetite for Destruction. But some of the other bands, the more hair bands, I didn't really relate to. So what happened when I played the Pixies, and I discovered the Pixies and I played that Surfer Rose record, it was like, it was just a blueprint for people that wanted to make aggressive music with aggression within it, rock music, but yet quite sort of thoughtful and quiet, loud, and just what I saw as something that I could connect to and I related to.
So you hear Pixies, and you think to yourself, well, then I'm going to start this is the template. This is the blueprint for the band that I'm going to start next.
Well, yeah, to an extent. There's PJ Harvey had Rid of Me. Then she went on to make, when I was making 16 Stone, the record with Steve had just come out. And I just fell in love with those sounds. I fell in love with the approach. I fell in love, not so much with the bluesy songwriting, because I've actually avoided that myself, but she was just extremely inspiring. The Pixies, Sonic Youth, The Fall, My Bloody Valentine, all dub music. I grew up on reggae, you know, specifically dub music from West London, all the kind of dancehall stuff. And so everything I liked just went into those, like a little pot, little mixing bowl of all those things. And you know, everybody's ultimately going to end up. The best shot you have is, of course, being yourself. And then, but you take all these influences and you just put them in the pot and and stir them around and spit them out. And so the Pixies were just really strong like that. All the semitone lines, they weren't the same lines that you got out of you know, when you heard a Bon Jovi record, you know, a huge Bon Jovi record, and that approach to making songs and making music, and a really viable, massive, successful, people love it, that approach. Just in terms of, for me, this felt a bit more counterculture. It's more in line with the books that I read, more in line with the authors that I liked, from, you know, Ginsberg, Ted Hughes, Bukowski, all these guys, or Sylvia Plath as well. I like her as well. Patti Smith. And so, I don't know, people have names for things, but you just sort of, for me, I just put them into a blender and then push them out through my ideas, and they inevitably come out differently, you know?
I understand. I think that oftentimes there's a tendency to want to name things after the fact, but of course, like any sort of creation, just comes from all the things that you love, and the life that you lead, and the music that both inspires you, and the way that the music was made that inspires you. But what I find interesting is that, I mean, and I know you've told this story before, but I was hoping you might tell it again for those who are listening who don't know it, is that the actual songwriting process came a little bit later, and that the big hit, Come Down, which we have. Can we play a little bit of it?
We got the DJ.
It still sounds really, really great. That's Come Down from 16 Stone from Bush. When you're taking all this in, and you're listening, and you're reading Ginsberg, and you're reading Sylvia Plath, and you're listening to the Pixies, and you're being influenced by PJ Harvey and My Bloody Valentine, talk to me about the moment that you go, okay, well, I'm going to write something. Because for people who don't know, that's the first song you wrote, and that ended up becoming sort of your big hit.
All that happened is that after my second band disbanded, my best friend went off to Boston to music college, and then on to Moscow Conservatory to learn how to be a composer. And the guitar player kind of gave up on me. And so while I was kicking around in London looking for a guitar player, and I kind of thought that it was pretty weak that I was unable to move forward with writing unless I had a guitar player. I just thought, I was like, it didn't sit well with me. So I thought, while I'm waiting to meet someone, why don't I just try and just see what it's like to not just do the top lines and be suggestive, you know? And that's what I did. And then when I began to write these songs, the guy that I went to record them with was Nigel, who became the guitar player. But at first, he was not interested in writing any of the songs. He just wanted me to go and play those, bring him songs. Wanted me to bring him songs so he didn't have to think about them, but he enjoyed demoing them up. He's really good in the studio. And so I'd bring in 3-4 songs, and then I'd say, do you want to write now? And he'd say, no, just bring more songs. He was getting paid for other work at the time, so that was it. I just continued to write songs, continued to take them into him. And then after we had about 12 songs, he said, let's get a band. Let's get some people to play these songs live. So we had a set up with a couple of people. Then they kind of came and went. One went into rehab because he'd been rehearsing admirably on heroin. But I wasn't aware of that because I think heroin suited his drumming. He was a really good drummer. And he left to get sober. Then I got an Iranian drummer, Amir, who was wonderful. And he was great at Bestfield jazz drummer. And then just before we signed, he left to join a 12-piece jazz band. He said, I have to leave. And he joined a jazz band. And then I signed a record deal, and I met this Robin, the drummer. He met about a month before we signed it. And we signed, and we had all these demos, made the record. And that was it.
When you were making the record, did you have any awareness of like the thing that we're making is very special, or it's very good, or it might do something for us?
I'd like to say, yeah, but I didn't have any confidence. I don't have that much now. So it was more like, I remember thinking, I wish my record was more like Polly's.
Like PJ Harvey.
Recording the songs. And I was like, how do we make it more like that? Because I was in love with that record. I just couldn't stop playing it. And I suddenly was like, we've got too many parts. There's too many things going on. This is not. And at that point, I really didn't, my ambition was pretty much shot. All my ambition was when I was younger and in those other bands, and I felt really ambitious. And this felt like I was never going to be successful, but I might as well fade away having made or been in a great band that I felt 1,000% I believed in, and the other two bands I was in, I didn't. So sometimes you have to be in bands to find out, sometimes you be in the wrong band to find out the kind of band you want to be in. And so when I began making the demos for Bush and hearing what Nigel had done, I was like, wow, we're really on our way to being an interesting, rough trade, super cool club band with a good vibe. And I finally felt proud of myself. There's other two bands I never felt proud of myself because I wasn't sure if the music was great. I was always like, I don't know. I was like, and I remember saying to the guy in my first band, that's when the Stone Roses were happening. The Stone Roses are an amazing band. I love the Stone Roses. And I remember saying to him, why can't we do music more like this? Why can't it be, how do you get this indie sound? I remember him saying, oh, you just don't play very well. And it always struck me. It always struck me. I thought, yeah, have you ever had that situation where someone gives you an answer, you have an answer for them that you live with for years, but you've never said it to them? Like, I was always like, wow, it was too heavy to say. I remember walking away thinking, what, the Stone Roses, isn't it because they're just fucking really good? Isn't it because they've got really good creativity? Isn't it because they had a great idea? They're kind of nice. That when they do those kind of beats, the loops that now are everywhere, boy bands. But when they had that first coming out, the Grace snare and all that loopy thing, that was the funky drummer James Brown, and that was such a cool band. I love them so much. And it's brilliant. My attempt to inspire my guitar player with how good the Stone Roses was, for him to say what a good musician he was. He was too good to play like that. And I was like, I definitely thought, I think he's definitely wrong, but I didn't really have the articulacy to tell him why he was wrong. I should have said, just come up with something as good as them,
I love that idea that you were incredibly ambitious in the first two bands. And this was the band that you knew that the songs were great, but you weren't feeling that deep seated ambition in the same way, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah,
but then
I knew there's no outlet, because there's no outlet. There's no radio in England for PJ Harvey. There's no radio, and Pixies weren't on the radio. Pixies were played at a rough trade store, and if they came to London, you go and see them.
So when that record blew up and sold, I think it's 6 times, almost 7 times platinum in the US right now?
At least by now. That was in the 90s. Yeah, imagine it now.
What's the revelation then, Gavin?
That I was finally in the right place in my life. And I'd spent all my life thinking that I was never in the right place, always in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so this was the first sense of momentum where things went really right. And the seeds that we had sown bore fruit. You know, it was the first time I'd ever experienced that. So my thing was to try and maintain it.
I want to play one of the songs off that record. Just take a listen. That's Glycerine from Bush. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine about what they think about when they hear that song. And someone told me, it was classic high school dances, like that we would dance to that at our high school dances here in Canada. Another person told me about sort of sitting in their parents' room or sitting in their bedroom at their parents' house and going through a breakup and listening to that and sort of crying and feeling very sad. And I told a story that I was in grade 7 when a guy named Adam Manning played that at our junior high variety show on guitar. And I thought, that's the coolest thing anyone can ever do is play guitar. And he played that song. As soon as I learned how to play guitar, I learned Glycerine right away so I could try to be like it. So I want to ask you, what goes through your head when you hear that song?
Gratitude and familiarity. Some people seem to have a lot of trouble with songs that get them a lot of success and give them a life. For me, the way that I see, my life is principally, I focus as a songwriter. So if you've had songs that have connected with people and people like, and my favorite thing about it is there's a lot of people talking to me back in the day about how it was the first time they had reconsidered music by a lot of people that listen to, very driving, heavier music or guitar-y music, alternative music. It's the first sort of song that made them kind of take a moment and take a breath. I'm just really lucky, grateful, lucky, proud, and in awe of that song because it's done so much for me and anyone in our organization. Clive Lang, the producer, was going to lose his house he had a sort of a holiday spot somewhere, and as soon as he worked on the record, and so anyway, the house now called Glycerine, Chalet Glycerine.
Oh, lovely. So
I have noted a couple of times I've yet to receive an invite to this place, but that's okay. That's a little ungrateful, I would say. File under ungrateful Clive, but that's all right. That's up to him.
Why did you want to work with Steve Albini on the record after that? I mean, there aren't a lot of artists who at that stage of their careers, I mean, I guess Nirvana's an example, but like had chosen to work with Steve, who was this iconoclastic, super principled guy. Not a lot of bands had gone to them at that stage.
I was deeply in love with the Jesus Lizard, Fugazi, Slint, the PJ Harvey record, the band Souls that I had actually ended up signing I had a label for a while when I was mostly indulged. And I just loved the way his record sounded. I loved the feeling. I mean, you spoke earlier about a scene. It's almost a scene of bands that go with Steve. And I don't know, it was, at that point, we probably had the opportunity to work with a lot of people. And I thought, like, I've been listening to him for so long, and we'd been on the road for 3 years, and I thought that no one else could capture the band live. And now, if we went off with Mutt Lange, if he had worked with us, which he may have turned us down, you do each track, you do each guitar string individually. Literally, that's how they made those records. Make a chord with each. So I went the opposite way. I went with someone who had a history of capturing bands and getting the most out of that feeling. It's funny because nowadays we don't make music like that at all. Everything is separate. Everything is files. If you go to make a record, we just finished a record. Everyone's recording separately. When I said to the producer, I was like, we're doing the drums. Why don't we get the bass player as well? They play together. Like that's how records are made. He goes, oh, no, it's too much. No. So it's just the culture. People don't do it like that. But when we work with Bob Rock, and most records I've made, a lot of it starts with that you tracking as a band. It's really that went away, and I don't know if that's a good thing. You listen to a Mastodon record and you go, That's tracking with the band.
Yeah, it's a record. It's actually a record of a time. It's what you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Glenn John said that. Like the idea that there's the word record should mean record of a moment, and that moment is the Beatles all in the same room playing the song, or
That's what
yeah.
Aretha Franklin said about any vocal that you do. It's the best vocal, but it's the best vocal you can do that day. It's just the best vocal you can do that day.
It's a different philosophy. Did your label push back on you working with Steve?
To an extent, initially, yeah. I mean, Jimmy Iovine did say to me, wow, you huge gamble, and it paid off. But it definitely wasn't a commercial career move. It wasn't the smartest commercial career move. The record still went to #1, but it made for a different record. It's funny how you look back and you wish you did things differently, and you can't manicure the past like that. It just felt like the right thing to do, felt really exciting. And I think that if anything, sometimes my feeling is that I wish I had a bit more time between finishing a tour, starting with Steve. I felt a bit rushed. Those songs from the Bush first record were from the previous 2 years. It wasn't a treasure trove of every song I'd written since I was 12 years old. It was the previous year and a half's work. So I wasn't like that. It was like, I just remember feeling a bit rushed about it. And I wished I had a bit more time. And that's the nature of that business that was when you sold records. So you'd make a record tour. And it just was very difficult to take the time that I think we, would have benefited from. But, it's everyone, it's so nice to look back and wish you could manicure it better.
Yeah, I mean,
but it just is what it is, and you have to live with it.
I mean, I was just going to tell you that I think it's a great record, and I think it was the right call, and I think
Thank you.
I really do.
Thank you. I mean, I wish that I was better, because I do think that it's a bit long-winded at times, and Steve was so sure about not producing as such. So when I hear it, sometimes I'm like, oh man. Sometimes I just go, Jesus. But we were like, we were a jam band at that point. We became a jam band because we were playing that first record in arenas, and we didn't have enough songs. So we would just have these long pieces. And then if I would, so not possibly our best work, but it just was all we could do. We were just forever trying to catch up to being professional or something. I don't know.
I mean, I was watching you guys live before I came in here. I watched the Woodstock 99 performance. And speaking of Glycerine, when you said that, people came up to you and said that Glycerine is this moment where, hey, this is the first time I've listened to something that's quieter and something a little bit more serene. I don't know if you've ever watched it back or if you've seen yourself on that performance at Woodstock 99. But right before you do Glycerine, you go like this. Like I see you take this calming breath right before you did that song.
There's a lot of people there. It's intimidating.
I just want to go back to the thing you said before. Like you were talking about how back in those days you sold records, it was albums and tours and albums and tours and albums and tours. But the band did extremely well and has had a legacy that's led it to being able to do greatest hits tours and will sell out all across Canada. Briefly, what is the biggest difference you've noticed between the environment that young musicians are coming into today versus the environment that you found yourself in back then?
Well, quite obviously, when I began, if you made something good, people might buy it. Now, if you make something good, people might stream it. And I have 2 sons that are poised to make music their lives. And I couldn't be more concerned for them.
Really?
It's like, I don't understand. I've been a musician my whole life, and I'm at a loss to explain to someone how to do it, how to build from the ground up, how to get a career in that. It's just terrifying, because how do young bands get paid? I can't work it out. I don't know. Maybe you get one song with loads of streams, and we know that Spotify barely pays, and whatever they pay, the record companies make sure they siphon off most of it before it gets to the artist. So it's the same deal. Artists getting screwed, record companies making a fortune and getting all the money. So same shitty business. But if you love it, what are you going to do? You just do the best you can, and You can obviously make money touring, but it takes a while to build up a catalog so that people want to come and see you. That's a crapshoot. So the difference is, I think it's much, much harder now. And it was nearly impossible then. So I don't know what the odds are, but they don't feel good for young musicians, which breaks my heart for them, because we always need music. We always need people's opinions. It's not, AI can take care of many things, but you talk about people relating to other people, it's by writing that brutally painful, honest lyric that other people can relate and get strength from. That exchange will never go away, because people will continually be upset and look for other people that understand them.
I mean, it's beautifully said, and lovely to meet you. And thanks so much for making the time for us.
Thanks so much.